Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review for the Ending Fire series by Saraa El-Arifi. This is an adult fantasy trilogy, with the first book being The Final Strife, the second book being The Battle Drum, and the third book being The Ending Fire. This series takes place in a fantasy world where everyone is black, but everyone has a different tone of blood, so different color of blood. So oppression exists still, but instead of skin color, it's blood color. In the empire in which this is set, the red-blooded people are at the top of the hierarchy, and then there are blue-blooded people who are in sort of like the servant role and are not, again, able to kind of go up in caste, and then there are clear-blooded people who are like the bottom of the bottom. In the first book, we're following two main characters, Scylla and Anor. Scylla was raised by a rebellion, as part of a rebellion, and she was actually a red-blooded child who was swapped with a blue-blooded child by this rebellion. So she has been raised by dusters, as the blue-blooded people, and even though she is an ember red-blooded. And the whole goal of this was to be able to raise a red-blooded child with a blue-blooded heart, or like caring about the like dusters and everything, and then put them into political power, because every, I think, 10 years there's a thing called an Actabar, where there's like a magical sort of competition in order to raise certain people up to be the heads of government, but you can only enter if you're an ember. So the whole goal was to swap kids in order to have some kids, and there was multiple that they did this with, in order to have some kids who could go into government later on. Anor is the blue-blooded child who was placed into an ember household. No one knows about this except for her mother, who hates her and is, again, one of these people of power. Eventually, these two characters' paths cross because Scylla wants to enter this competition, but for a number of reasons, things end up getting messed up. She has an ongoing drug addiction that makes things very challenging, and she ends up having to like kind of work with Anor, and Anor also wants to be a part of this government as well, but she doesn't have red blood, but no one knows. Anyway, that is how kind of characters end up intersecting, and everything goes from there. So this whole series is based around this system of oppression that is set up within this empire, but then gets expanded out as the series goes on. These characters at the heart of a rebellion, but this rebellion that over time has not done well and has been almost stamped out, and all of that. And then we find out more about like the world, religion, things like that. So as you can probably tell from the synopsis, there are some heavy triggers in here for drug abuse that is throughout the series, like drug abuse and withdrawal, death of family, death of friends. Again, this is a rebellion. There's a lot of oppression, torture, things like that. So first off, we talk about the world building. I really enjoyed the world in this first book. Like, it was just enough. It kind of like was making sense. As the series goes on, a lot gets expanded with the world in a way that's really cool, but also doesn't really have enough time. So my main complaint with the series, let's just put it out there right away, is that it expands in a way that is like too fast for the time that we have. And that kind of happened with every single part of this series. So that's just like something to know about my thoughts about it going in. So like the first book was definitely the strongest as far as like the world and things, talking about the rebellions, talking about the different like hierarchies and things, different types of magic. There's ways that they use blood magic and their blood to like do things. So all that's very cool, but again, it was condensed into this one area. As the story goes on, the world gets expanded, and you kind of figure out that this is not the only place that exists, and there are other things and other people and all of that. So those elements, while potentially interesting, didn't have enough time to get fully fleshed out, and so like I didn't really care about any of those things. The core parts of this world and the rebellion and all of that, that was really good. But as we start to extend out, it just feels like a lot of threads were dropped with that. Next, I talk about our characters. Scylla, especially, is a very unlikable character. Actually, a lot of these characters are like fairly unlikable, but especially Scylla in the first book, super unlikable because she's a heavy drug addict who is like super stuck in her addiction, and as such is like not treating anyone well around her or herself, right? So she can be like a very frustrating character to be in her head or to read about. But also, as the series goes on, she grows a lot. She is very interesting, and so is Anor. Like, Anor and her are both like pretty interesting characters, and I enjoy their arcs throughout. The other characters that we get introduced to as time goes on, I liked a lot of side characters, but some of those characters turn into POV characters as the series goes on, and I cared a little bit less about them as POV characters. So yeah, it was kind of like hit and miss with character stuff. There is one character who's a side character that becomes a POV character who is fantastic. She is from a part of like the clear-blooded people, and the whole thing with that group is that they're the most oppressed group. They've had their tongues cut out and their hands removed. So they are completely like a servant class, but they have their own rebellion network working within that. And so they use sign language without hands. And so there's this whole sign language component. And this character also is a trans woman. So the like diversity and things in here and how those are used is really cool. And I really liked her as well. But I feel like we needed just those characters, and some of the expansion that we got into other characters and what's going on with them and their plot lines, I didn't really get connected to as much. And especially in the last book, it felt like the stakes weren't as high for our main characters in a way that they should have been for the what this is building up to and this like rebellion war thing that the whole series is about. And instead, a lot of that suspense was placed on these other characters that we don't really care about and haven't connected to because we haven't followed them the entire time. So last time we talked about the plot, kind of like I've been saying, the plot was strongest in the first book when it was much more contained to a certain area and only two characters and all of that. As it expands, it starts to kind of lose traction in a lot of ways and kind of have a lot of dropped threads. But the first book, super solid, really enjoyable, like the whole competition thing, while not being too competition-y because I don't really like a competition book, but has like a competition element, but all this political intrigue stuff, this like rebellion thing, all of that is really cool. Even the second book I liked a decent amount for like there's some expansion on like different cultures, some of the like the religious and political things happening, so that was really cool, but there were some threads that started to get kind of loose and dropped. And then the final book I just felt really rushed, didn't really wrap up in a way that felt satisfying for the stakes that were out there. And so the last book was probably my least favorite. So this series kind of gets worse as it goes on, unfortunately. I still would recommend it. It's still a decent series. I even think you could read potentially the first book and kind of like be fine with it. But yeah, if you like sort of rebellion stories and some of that, then this is still a solid series. But this is an author that I'm going to be kind of iffy with moving on because I've read now this whole trilogy, and then the first book in a new series that she came out with that I did not like at all. And I think did I DNF it? If I didn't DNF it, I strongly disliked it by the time I got to the end. So yeah, a little bit shaky. I think her stories get a little bit away from her. She like expands a little bit too quickly. So Final Strife, I think I gave like 4 to 4.5 stars. Battle Drum, I gave like 4 to 3.5. And then Ending Fire, probably 3 stars. And like overall, probably a 3-star series. Decent. I think there's other books that do this sort of like rebellion aspect better, but still solid. If you enjoyed hearing about some of these elements and things, then I think you would really enjoy this. So comment below, let me know what you thought of the Ending Fire. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all you guys soon. Bye.